Thanks for joining us. We are here with Dr. Jeff Brook, who is with the Dalalana School of Public Health and the Department of Chemical Engineering at the University of Toronto, as well as the Air Quality Research Division of Environment and Climate Change Canada. Thank you for joining us.
Yeah, great to be here. Thank you.
Dr. Brook, what are some recent advances in atmospheric science that may influence how air quality is managed?
You know, atmospheric scientists are really mostly working on trying to develop models. So they're, mathematical tools that can link what's coming out of a smokestack or a tailpipe or other types of sources near the ground to then what happens when they interact in the atmosphere and where they go. And over the years, that's been how all the knowledge we have is summarized to the models, and the models allow us to make forecasts like we do now for weather forecasts, but we can make forecasts of the chemicals in the air. And they are also used to say, let's turn this smokestack off or that one off and then see how things change. So a real motivating factor in atmospheric science has been to make these models better and better. And one of the amazing things that I've seen in my career is that when I started 25 years ago or so, the models had the computing power that was allowing us to sort of break up the surface of the Earth, or actually even not that, just North America, into sort of boxes that are about 127 kilometers on a side. And you might be able to ask that to say, let's sort of calculate the air pollution for a month or so, and then maybe do a few of these scenarios where you turn smokestacks on and off. That was sort of the extent of the computing power. It was very limited. Today, now we're running models twice a day, continuously. We've cut those boxes down to 2.5 by 2.5 kilometers, have put in a lot more sophisticated knowledge of science, of like the interactions of how air pollutants form and change. We're able to ingest the real-time observations from sites around the country that are observing data to make sure the models are staying close to reality, and just do this continuously. So the advance in computing power is just tremendous over this time. And now, as atmospheric scientists develop these, we're making them available to air quality managers, and they can use them now in terms of like management benefits. They can use them to look at very local questions about decisions for air pollution changes. They can use them in a very important context to predict where the smoke from forest fires will go, when will it arrive, how bad might it be. And so the atmospheric scientists really work in that sort of paradigm of let's try to break it down into a model and then use these tools to support the forecasting end and the other end on the comparison of policies.
Okay, and how do you see the role of citizen science, if we can talk about citizen science for a sec, the role of citizen science in air management evolving? How do you see that evolving?
It's, information is power, right? So citizens do measurements, they get information. That's sort of what was talked about a lot in air pollution is new little inexpensive devices that allow a person to measure in their home, outside of their home, or wherever they're going, maybe in their car. And that's useful for them to get that information. If it's accurate, and sometimes we have to be careful about that, but if it's accurate, they may be able to use that information to affect change for their community, if they're able to communicate it. It requires the engagement, though, of the officials and the citizens to make sure that everybody's kind of on the same page and they understand, because it's sort of a double-edged sword. They could do this, but be jumping on an issue that isn't really an issue or was already understood. And so there's sort of this important back and forth, but it really is, again, information. It is empowerment. It can affect change. Citizens could use these new tools to measure, or groups, because they're we call them inexpensive, but they're still $1,000 or so to buy them. So more maybe groups could get them and think about what is the impact of all of us idling in front of our school. And do days where they maybe turn it on and off and see, did it benefit us, and how is that protecting our kids. So there's a lot of different things that people could really get engaged on with citizen science, and I think affect change at that local level.
Yes, engagement. Key word, yeah.
Yeah. It's an educational thing too, right? So there's always a need to try to raise up the level of knowledge in terms of, air pollution, as we're talking about air pollution in our meetings here. People sort of hear about an issue, they jump onto it today, and they think it's the worst issue they've ever heard of. And it's great to have that excitement, but they don't often know that there's been a long history of great improvements in air pollution. And so any ways you can sort of use this engagement in the citizen science to educate and spread the word about what remains to be done, hopefully the better will be in terms of actually doing it.
Right. How can we address air quality and climate change in a way that there are co-benefits?
That's an important question, and I really believe that we've done so much for air pollution. There's more to do, definitely. There's here in the Vancouver area, we know about ships coming into the ports. We know about terminals for coal, and so there's much that can still be done in thinking about air pollution in these local areas or local hotspots. But our greatest challenge is really greenhouse gas emissions, and how are we going to get those down? Not to mention how are we going to adapt to climate change as it comes. But our greatest challenge is the tremendous amount of greenhouse gas emissions that we have to reduce. So from my thinking, that's driving what we're going to do in terms of new technologies, new behaviors, new policies. So we don't want to sort of squash that, saying we got to think about the air pollution co-benefits. I think we need to just make sure we push hard on what we do for climate change issues. So much of it's combustion of fuels, which is going to have a benefit for air pollution. But once those are underway, now we can step back and say, okay, could we tweak this direction we want to go for a climate purpose to make sure that it's not maybe exacerbating an air pollution problem. And I think that's got to be the sort of the driving force. Let's get to business on what we do about greenhouse gas emissions, and be confident that many things are no regrets. They're going to have an air quality benefit, and then once we know what we're doing, we can then step back and adjust a bit for the air quality context.
Good, thanks. What do you think will be the most pressing air quality management issue issues in the coming decade, and what sort of new tools or approaches do you think will be needed to address them?
That's a big question, right? I've probably heard people say, we've done a lot for air pollution. We're on sort of a diminishing returns type curve for what we've done, and what's left to do is expensive and costly. Probably true. But I kind of think that we're now looking at issues from a few different perspectives, and one of them is that there are still remaining locations we call hotspots where exposures are higher. They could be affecting a certain community more than others, or a certain type of source or industry. Very complex issues because there is a codependence often on that area, be dependent on the jobs, and so there's always this trade-off: jobs, air pollution. That makes it a contentious issue and challenging to address at the same time. But it's really how do we address these hotspots, get them down. Sometimes they are in areas of more disadvantaged populations, so there's this importance of equity that's a concern. I don't think talked about as much in Canada as it is in, say, United States, but I think that's an issue that probably is going to become more and more recognized as part of that challenge. So hotspots are sort of what it's like today, and how do we do things about it. Another challenge I see is that we do enjoy quite clean air from a lot of things have happened over the past, and that's great. But there's always pressures for growth. In a lot of cases, Canada is a resource-based economy, and we know, like a place like Vancouver and other coastal areas, we have major locations for export of resources. And that sort of attracts lots of transportation, shipping, attracts potentially local industries, and we don't want to stop those sort of sources of economic growth, but these are also similar areas where we're already sort of close to the limit for air pollution. So how do the managers in these areas allow something to continue or something new to come in when you're close to the limit? What sort of concessions might they need to make with something that's maybe older and dirtier to make room for new sources? So it's kind of keeping things at their level, and preventing any deterioration, has got to be a main goal. But I see that really as a pressing challenge, is preventing deterioration in some key areas, and that's going to require some new thinking, new ways to think about what needs to be phased out or how it can be done more efficiently to make room for the new, make room for the growth. But at the same time, we need the tools so that if we're talking about a certain new activity coming into an area, we know much more about exactly what it's emitting, and we get better at really estimating what it's emitting, calculating what the implications might be for what it's emitting in its full mixture, not like one single pollutant, but its full mixture, its full impact. So bringing in maybe more life cycle thinking to these sorts of additions. But the tools are still not there to probably do all that as well as we could, and then to, of course, communicate it to the decision makers.
Yes.
So that's one key challenge. Another key challenge is very big in people's minds here and other places has been forest fires, and we have this feeling that we can't do anything about it. It's true, the fires are starting for various reasons, but we can't just say, okay, tomorrow whoever is up there in the sky, no, you can't ever have any more forest fires, because they just happen naturally, right? So we have to think about what are we going to do when they occur, and from the part of the atmospheric science, we're able to predict better, how bad they'll be, where they're going to move, the types of air pollution people might be exposed to, and maybe some advanced warnings from that. But I think we're still, really challenged with respect to the messages that we tell people. Do we, just stick with sort of the message that, this is bad, and if you think you're a susceptible person, like you might be an asthmatic, well, you should think about staying indoors, or maybe go visit a relative, or stop exercising. There's a sort of generic advices that are given now, and they're important to continue to do. But what more advice should we be giving? I often think about now about how we see in some of the very polluted developed countries in the world, people wear masks. I don't really know whether we've crossed that threshold yet here as to whether we would be telling people in areas where there's forest fires to be having a mask in their house and putting on a mask, and if they are, what benefits they would expect they could get from the mask. So sort of what would be the reason that they would do that, or investing in air cleaners in their houses and going to these next levels. These sorts of things do protect you, masks and air cleaners, but how far do we go down that road of sort of like Band-Aids to the solution, right? But it's here with us, the fires, and I think we need to think more about how we're going to be able to protect people, because what's in this smoke is absolutely harmful, and we don't really even know the long-term implications of people experiencing that.
Thank you for sharing your knowledge with us, Dr. Brook, and giving us lots to think about.
Yes, well, thank you for having me.